Hi, my name is Candace. I'm the house manager at Grace House Akron. Today we are doing module 8 of our caregiver training, certification training, and the topic is spiritual care at the end of life. So what's important about spiritual care? Spiritual beliefs affect how a person lives and dies. It also affects the patient's and family's acceptance of being on hospice care at that point, also palliative care, but in our realm of taking care of residents, they are already on hospice services. Hospice palliative care is holistic, which means that you're checking the person and evaluating their whole being. So spiritual, physical, mental, emotional. So spirituality, it contributes to the quality of life for that person that's dying. It also helps with the patient and family coping with the person's terminal illness and what that means. Spiritual well-being has been found to contribute to a good death for a resident. So those spiritual needs that a dying patient may have, there's quite a few listed here, but just to point out a few: for them to give and receive love, give and receive forgiveness, which is a big one because sometimes with our population of residents, there may be many things in their background, their history, that may have occurred between family members or friends that they may not have been able to settle or really even get a closure on. So that forgiveness is a big piece that sometimes if it's not settled, it may cause them to have some agitation in the last days of their life. So it also allows them to find meaning and purpose in life. Life review is something that we're getting started at Grace House through our volunteer program, and really getting a telling of the story of one's life. I think that's so important because the person that you see lying in the bed that may not be able to get up and do things for him or herself, that's not the whole story of that person. They've lived a life that we may not even know about. So getting their story is so important to understand who that person actually is. So that's just a few. You can read through the rest of them, but also I would point out that dying with dignity, that's something that I think everyone deserves no matter what their background is. This is just a quote: "May you have the commitment to know what has hurt you, to allow it to come close to you, and in the end to become one with you." Signs of spiritual distress. So this is kind of what I was alluding to in the previous screen. That spiritual distress is suffering or pain related to feelings of brokenness in one's relationship with either God or others, loss of meaning and purpose, and questioning of one's religious beliefs or values, or the loss of inner strength or sense of well-being. So a person in spiritual distress may make comments such as, "I thought I understood God, but now I do not know anymore. I feel so alone. How could this happen to me? It is my fault. I got the cancer. God is punishing me for being bad to my family." So these are things that people, when they're having spiritual distress, may make mention of or quote just because they're trying to toss around all these different things in their mind, like, did I do something? Like, it's my fault I got cancer because I did X, Y, and Z in my lifetime. I actually had a patient say that very thing to me. I think it was last summer, that he's like, it's my fault. I never would have got cancer had I not done this in my past. And I don't believe God operates that way, but in that time, it was like just really listening to him and trying not to just encouraging him, but being supportive that that's not where things are really at, but also to hear what he was saying because that's how he was feeling in that moment. Wisdom from our ancestors: the only cure for spiritual suffering is to lean into the pain. So some more signs of spiritual distress would be someone feeling hopeless, depressed, anxious, maybe that desire for ending their life before it's time, so suicide or hastened death, that he or she is a burden to others, the loss of will to live or the loss of dignity and control. There may be anger towards God or those representing God, like clergy or loved ones. They may feel confused or conflicted about their beliefs, uncertain about the meaning of life, especially if they feel like they don't have control over their life or what's going on with them, or they feel that there's physically nothing that they can do. They start to question, what is my purpose? I'm just here. Worthlessness or extreme sadness. Spiritual signs that death is coming soon. There may be a lack of interest in material things. So a person may start to pull away from not just material things, but from people. They may be more silent, not talking very much, or they may not have a concern about their appearance. Have anything you want to say so far?
Yes, it came to mind when we were speaking about what spiritual suffering looks like. Sometimes it's very forward. There's a lot of existential pain that's very evident. But recently, I also was spending time with someone who I think had buried it a little bit, and they were covering it up with a good dose of playfulness. But then in speaking about how they were worried for their loved ones after they would die, the sentiment was, I'm scared. So once you can pass through and lean into the pain, I think that does lend itself to a bit of healing.
Agreed. I think that's a good point too, that sometimes people suppress all of that and just try to cover it up with other things, like you said, with the humor, and not really leaning into what it really is. And it's going to be painful. It may not feel good, but I think it's worth them leaning into that pain so that there's that acceptance that occurs. Buddhist beliefs and practices. So not everyone practices, of course, the same type of religion or have the same type of religious beliefs. But in this particular, it's just to give you examples of what some of these beliefs and practices are in different religions. So with the Buddhists, they focus on attaining a calm state of mind and compassion. Illness in their realm is a result of actions in this world or the previous life. Healing results from knowing the wisdom of Buddha. A temple or altar with a statue of Buddha may be in that person's house. Now, I'm not sure if a person is like actually in a setting like Grace House, if they would bring a statue here, or if that's something that they would maybe just have in their home. But that is something that I know that they typically have present. And then they do frequent meditation or chanting. So they believe death is a part of life and offers a person the chance to improve in the next life, because they believe in afterlife, previous life. Some believe that the soul remains near the body for several days. So the family may ask that the body go untouched for as long as possible in the position that the person passed away or died in, so that the spirit can make a peaceful and full transition to the next world. So with Roman Catholics, their central focus is to obtain eternal life with God in heaven. They may see illness as a punishment for thinking bad, sinful thinking or behaviors. They use many signs or symbols such as the cross or crucifix, holy water, or statues of saints. They go to confession and attend Mass, and praying for them is very important. They usually have the rosary for that. And the ill may receive the sacrament of the sick. So I believe that's like a blessing that they'll receive. For Hindu, death is natural and unavoidable, but it's not actually real. They don't eat beef and often practice fasting. So fasting is a big part of their practice. Physical modesty and cleanliness is very important. They do believe in reincarnations before obtaining union with their God, which is, they refer to their God as Brahman. So some of the things, like they have 4 social classes. A person inherits his or her social class at birth, but they do things upon death, like the body is washed, anointed, and dressed in new clothes after death. They believe in cremation, and water burial is also preferred. And because they have those 4 social classes, only those of the same social class can touch the body of whatever that person that died was a part of. So if they were in the 3rd social class or 2nd social class, if you're in that same social class, then you can touch the body. Doing good deeds and giving to the needy are very important to them. So I had experience with a Jewish, this was when I worked in the hospital, someone of Jewish beliefs that I think it was on the palliative care unit that passed away. But anyways, so they refer to Orthodox beliefs. They focus on life and preserving it. Death is not to be feared. They believe it's a natural part of life, and it comes from God. The soul exits the body and continues to live after the body is dead. Kosher foods are eaten and should be made available. So after the death of a person, the body is not left alone until burial. The person's eyes should be closed immediately after they die. And they receive a special washing by I think it's pronounced Shivra, Kadisha, specially trained members of the Jewish community. So they actually come to the site where that person has died, and they do this special washing on them before anything happens with that body, like it being picked up, the remains being picked up by a funeral home or anything like that. Burial occurs as soon as possible after the death. Death is followed by 7 days of intensive family mourning, and that's called the Shiva. So this is also another one that I had. I remember the person was on palliative, and as he was dying, we had to turn his bed in a certain direction so that it was, I think it was facing east. But the Muslim or Islamic, they may not want to use remaining time. They may want to use remaining time for prayer and meditation. They pray, I think it is like 6 times a day. Members may follow strict dietary guidelines and period of fasting. 5 periods of prayer is 5 that they require daily. They believe that peace follows total submission to the will of God. So they also consider death to be a natural process and a return of the soul to God. Cleanliness is important, and they may require bathing, cleaning at least 5 times per day before the required daily prayer. Personal hygiene provided by persons of opposite gender may be very distressing. So before the person dies, this is something that all of us would need to keep in mind, that may not be something. They may have someone in their family that would be more comfortable for them to bathe that resident. The body must be turned towards Mecca, which is towards the east, the holy city, at the time of death, which is what I was thinking of. Any questions so far? Comments? Okay. And this is the group that most people are familiar with, but Protestant believes God is holy, a holy being that exists within the Trinity of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Best understood through the Bible, God loves, protects, judges, and forgives those who ask. Believers have a direct and personal relationship with God through his Son, Jesus. Protestants focus on salvation through the gift of God's grace in Jesus' death, belief in afterlife, that heaven is promised based on that person's personal salvation, and prayer, scripture, and communion and baptism are key occurrences in the practices, daily practices of a Protestant. So that was just a review of some of the different religions that we can sometimes cross and take care of people that practice those beliefs. But now, just considering the role of you as the caregiver, some things that you can do to be and provide spiritual care for our resident is to be a good listener first and foremost. This would allow the patient and or their family to express feelings, fears, and spiritual concerns. Try not to rush them when they are sharing what they have to say. Just be a good listening ear. It may mean that you have to ask questions that may encourage the patient or family to talk about their beliefs or lack of beliefs. They may not have any practicing religious beliefs. Do not make judgments about what they're saying. This is what's real for them. This is what their truth is. So it's just a matter of respecting that. Encourage the patient to review his or her life. Allow periods of silence and acceptance. Sometimes it's just a matter of you not saying anything, just them knowing that you're there and listening. Avoid imposing your own beliefs on the patient and or family. Develop a trusting relationship with the patient and family is also a good thing to keep in mind as you're providing spiritual care. People that develop a rapport with you are going to feel more comfortable to be able to share their feelings and their beliefs. You showing respect and interest about their beliefs also is another way of developing that trust, so that they can feel open and vulnerable to share. Validate the importance of that person's life and let the patient and family know you care about them. Those are all ways that you can develop that rapport and trust. Remaining present with the patient when they may be fearful or they're really having a bad moment of increased symptoms, whether it be pain or shortness of breath, that can make a person really afraid in those moments, and they may be suffering in those moments. So just to know that you're there also develops that trusting relationship. Knowing their likes and dislikes also can help you to develop that trusting relationship, because that sends the message to the resident that you care about them and that you care, that you're appealing to whatever they like or don't like. So all things to let them know that they're important and that they matter. Role of the caregiver: help the patient finish any unfinished task. And I think as the caregiver, if you're able, you may not be able to physically do the things that they may need finished in their lives, but at least you know and can pass that information on to maybe someone that's on their care team with hospice, whichever hospice they're on service with. So that's one of the first points here, is talk with your team about any such task that you might identify. If the team agrees, they can help, whether it be a letter that needs to be written, making a phone call to a specific person, or allowing the resident or patient to talk through the relationship that needs mending. Encourage the presence of loved ones, and encourage the patient to discuss their spiritual concerns with clergy or the chaplain. So we have at Grace House, any resident that's here, whatever hospice service they're on with and receiving care and management of their care, they have spiritual care chaplains that can come in to discuss any concerns with them. But then we also have our spiritual advisory board that there's a spiritual advisor that comes once every few times a month, But they rotate, and they're able to get a different person to come and address any of those issues like throughout the year. There's someone here on our staff that can do that, so which is very helpful. Know the patient's plan of care related to their spiritual issues. If you have questions or concerns about the patient's spiritual needs or issues, talking to the team or the chaplain can maybe clear those things up. But again, spiritual advisory board members and the hospice chaplain, you can maybe checking with me as the house manager, and I can follow up asking the chaplain how we can help with those spiritual issues when they're not physically present here at the house. Encourage and assist the patient with any devotional activities. Maybe they have a Bible and maybe just want someone to read a few scriptures for them. Maybe a prayer with them, and it could be anything like that. You have anything to add?
It just came to mind as you were speaking about the different faith traditions, specifically from the literature. It's of the Buddhist tradition. It's the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. When they speak about a good death, they speak about life, actually, and that you should be practicing for death throughout your life, as in reviewing your values and living well. But it occurs to me that, in this population, we have a lot of folks who have been in such traumatic or immediate situations, they don't have the luxury, of thinking holistically about their life. And so when they get to us, there's a lot of catching up to do, and it feels a bit like going to the gym after not having gone for a year. You're very sore the day after, right? So just keeping in mind that we probably see a higher incidence of existential distress here because of that.
Agreed. I think that's a very excellent point. And I think hopefully when they get the life review up and running, I'm hoping that may help in that area, so that it'll help them work through some of those things that maybe have been suppressed and not really talked about or dealt with, so that they can have a good death. Yeah. As a caregiver, I think being aware of your own spiritual beliefs and needs, and becoming comfortable with your own spirituality, so that way it helps you to accept the beliefs that another individual, such as a resident and or their family, may have. And it's not to push your beliefs off on them, but just to be grounded in what you believe, so that when somebody has something different that gets in the mix, that you're not swayed or feel like, oh, they're not practicing, quote unquote, the right way. So that you can be acceptant and still believe in what you believe, acceptant of what they believe. Provide a pleasant, home-like, peaceful environment, including music, and some of the TV channels that we have. It can show pictures of nature and flowers, and it's just music in the background. That can also be very helpful for our residents, especially when they're in that actively dying phase. Fostering hope. So you want to support the patients and families' efforts to cope with the end of life when appropriate, allowing them the time to share their feelings, those things that may be delightful, joyful, or humorous. Help the patient set and obtain short-term goals. Now, that could be something as simple as they may want something specific for their meal, like they may want some ice cream or something. That may be a goal of theirs, but you can help that happen. If it's something larger and the team needs involvement, then at that point you would just notify, and then hopefully we can make it happen. We had a resident, she was here the end of last year. She passed away in December, I believe, and she wanted to see a horse. So they were able to get a pony here, and that came as a result, I believe, of one of the volunteers just going in, chit-chatting with her, and she mentioned it, and that volunteer was able to take it back to the team. but he knew someone in the community that, an organization that had ponies that they could bring, or a miniature horse is what it was, a miniature horse. So, and that happened, and they were able to bring, the horse's name was Willie Nelson. I'll never forget that. So, and that just made her day. Like that was such a high point. But it's those things, if you know this might be one of their last wishes or something like that, letting the team know, and we can try to make it happen as best as possible. Reinforce the patient's accomplishment and successful coping. Allow the patient to make choices, as many choices as they're able to, so that they have that certain feeling of control, because they most times feel that their level of control is like gone. So in summary, spiritual care is the care provider's response to the patient's need to connect with a superior force or being and give meaning to life. Spiritual beliefs and practices are important. The patient's and family's spiritual needs include experiencing and communicating love, forgiveness, and acceptance, finding meaning and purpose in life, taking part in the life review, maintaining hope and peace. So that's the gist of what we've talked about. But again, just keeping and maybe considering that not everybody believes the same way. Not everybody practices the same religious beliefs and on a daily basis. So just being aware of that, being accepting of it, and being able to care for that person, so that you're keeping all of that in mind when you're providing your care to them. So if there's any other comments at this point?